such a universal like yoga for athletes story. And a handful of years ago, my wife and I were working with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that was, the first class, I remember we taught to them, like there's maybe like 40 guys there, and it was the same thing. Like, we would call out a pose and bring them into Warrior One, and they would just be huffing and puffing and overworking, over trying in every pose. But, that was like their mentality, their football mentality that they brought in, where you push 110%. And it took them weeks. We started this like in May, and it took like a couple months, for them to start to buy in that you don't have to do everything super, super hard and push it. And,
Mm.
and to answer your question, yeah, that was the same thing for me. Like the first yoga class I took for my wife, I immediately, just everything I learned from football and sports, it was like, okay, I'm going to push, I'm going to press, and I'm going to try to do all the poses, because that's how it's supposed to be, right? We're supposed to do everything 100%. And it took me a whole bunch of classes to realize that that was not an effective way to do yoga. And it was class after class where I would be exhausted, until eventually I started to realize, because I remember my Karen, my wife, she would just be like, she'd talk to the class about breathing. And that was something I had never heard of. Like, why would I breathe like in a sport? Like that doesn't make any sense. There's no time to breathe, because we need to keep going. So that was like a big awakening for me too. And that's like whenever we work with sports teams, like we work with a University of Pittsburgh football team, sometimes a basketball team, and we bring in the breath work. And that's always, because we always know that's going to be the hardest thing for them to take on. And if they don't take on the breath, if they don't to buy into the breath, they're probably not going to do yoga very long, because like you mentioned, they're just going to struggle. And if they just keep struggling, they're like, well, why am I going to do this?
Mm.
So, but
Hmm.
that's like like, how do you get them to that point though? So that's hard, and so that's up for the individual athlete to like, to have the discipline to stick with it to get to that point.
Well, it's like a complete mental shift, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, but that's a shift that's, I think, I mean, just to bring it back, like, that's a real common attitude. I'm sure it's super common in football. It's gotta be essential in football, that, like, striving
Mhm.
and, like, 110%, like, aggressive, like, work harder kind of thing, but, like, that's really cultural for, at least I feel like I can speak for Americans. People in
Mhm.
the United States, like, is, like, intense, this attitude of striving and trying that we have, and I teach mindfulness, and it's like we come to it there, and there it's, like, even more fruitless than in yoga, because it's,
Mhm.
like, all there is, like, sitting,
Mhm.
and I guess it's, like, in yourself, how did you see that shift from that striving and and what would you describe what you shifted into?
Yeah, well, when my career ended, like for a lot of athletes, it was not on my own, not my own terms. Like I had this plan, like a okay, so now I made the NFL after playing at the University of Pittsburgh. I've made the NFL. Now I want to be in the league for 10 or 15 years. I want to make a certain amount of money, and I want to like play for this team, and so on and so forth. So I had all these goals. But when that was pulled away from me, so to speak, just after just a handful of years in the league because of injuries, I really struggled like with like who I was, my identity, because from a very young age I got into kicking, like, when I was 8 years old. So from 8 until age 26, 18 years, like I was a kicker. That's who I always thought was going to be, and that's who I was for a while. And so when that ended, I really was stuck for a few years with what next? And so when I started doing yoga, it was just physical. That's how my wife got me into it. She's like, hey, just, do it to help your back. But when I started practicing and practicing and practicing, and I wasn't even trying to get anything more out of it than the physical, but when I would start to practice on a more consistent basis, and when I would start to breathe and be more with myself, because I think for a lot of the time period, I was always very external, like this is how things are supposed to be. My life's supposed to have this beginning, this middle, this end. That when I would practice yoga and I would just like be there, for example, in Shavasana, I just had to be with my thoughts and be with myself. I think over time that started to penetrate, where I started to see like more clearly that, hey, it's okay that your career didn't go the way it was, because now there's other opportunities out for me. So that was like the big shift when I started to see more clearly that life's not always going to go the way like you want it to. and I never really stopped to pause and, smell the roses, so to speak, and really be in the moment, because I was always like, what's next? Okay. So if I was trying out for an NFL team, I wouldn't be happy till I made the team. And if I'm, if I happen to make a team or get a certain, point into the progress, then I wanted more. And so there was always like that more. But just the practice of yoga, meditation, mindfulness helped me to realize, like, hey, just there's something happening right now, and the past is where it is in the past. So
It's a shift that happens. It's an incredible shift, and it's a shift that happens really gradually, like, we don't even
mhm,
realize it a lot of the time because it's happening so gradually. I mean, I teach mindful parenting, and we start with mindfulness, and one of the things that happens is that, the first thing we start with is a meditation practice, and then the thing that's really interesting that happens, I see again and again, is that the person who's in the course, who's the practitioner, most usually she doesn't see those changes in
mhm,
herself so much, but then her partner will say, "Oh wow, like you're different, like
right.
you're way
Mhm,
calmer, like with the kids or whatever." Like these differences, they because they're so imperceptible to ourselves. It's like watching our kids grow up. Like we don't see the changes in
right.
ourselves, but other people see those changes in ourselves. So I guess I imagine it's hard to kind of pinpoint like, "Oh, I was there and now I'm here." I mean, I guess that's hard to pinpoint for you. I mean, it's kinda hard for me too, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I had like a specific like aha moment.
Yeah.
It was just, like it was time, and just like you said, like very gradual, which I think is really common for a lot of people, like even come to our yoga studios. Like, sometimes like you can tell that they, just how they may talk to you, like they're looking for like a quick fix for what they're going through, but like it just that there's no like magic on off switch. And it's just for everyone, it's just, so different to have these, these shifts, so to speak. Yeah, and it was strange because like I suffered from, you could say, when I first started doing yoga, of of body issues, because I remember when I first did yoga, I'd look around the room, and there's 20 people in the room, and everyone's moving through the room, and there's a class full of women, and it was myself, when, because like men weren't doing yoga then, and I really struggled with that. Like I'm like, wow, I was just an NFL football player and I can't do this stuff. And I'd look in the mirror there and I'd see how my body looked, and I really struggled with that. And but that was also something too. The more I practiced, I started to realize that yoga wasn't about how I looked or how much I stretched. It was just, spending some time, that hour and a half of just focusing my breath, and all that other stuff didn't matter. But it took me a while to get to that point too. But that was something that was such a big eye opener for me, that I used to think like it was just this macho thing to be this professional football player, but there was nothing macho about it. If my body was really strong, but my mind wasn't, I really wasn't healthy. And so it was, through the practice of yoga and meditation, mindfulness, that made me realize that. But that took a while. And now, like, there's a lot of poses I can't do. Like some people, like when I meet them randomly and I tell them I do the yoga, like, oh, show me this pose. I'm like, I can't do that. Like I mean, for me, my yoga practice is pretty basic. I can do the down dogs, the high push-ups, the low push-ups, the warrior ones, but that's it. And when I first got into yoga, I tried to like go beyond all that, because that was, especially in around 2000 when I got into yoga, yoga was also about getting a certain point into the practice. It's become uh, more, I guess you could say, we talk about more about accessibility now and adaptability and listen to your body. But that really wasn't first yoga. It was about getting to a certain point. But I fell into that trap too, where I got hurt in yoga till I learned that, like, I realized it wasn't about that at all.
Catch new episodes of the Mindful Mama podcast and other free resources, including the Mindful Mom Guide at mindfulmamamentor.com. You can listen to every back catalog episode, including interviews with Dr. Dan Siegel, Janla Van Zant, Sharon Salzberg, and get meditations, join our private Facebook group, and more. Go to mindfulmamamentor.com now. I'll see you there.